Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to talk about 1985's Silver Bullet. Directed by Dan Attias and starring Corey Haim, Megan Follows, Gary Busey, Terry O'Quinn, and Everett McGill. Marty and Janey Coslaw are siblings living in a small town. Janey sometimes resents that Marty gets his way a bit more due to his confinement in a wheelchair. Marty, meanwhile, just wants to have as much fun as he can in his small town and is incredibly close to his Uncle Red. When a string of killings hits their small town with signs indicating the destruction might be caused by a werewolf, the two siblings band together with Uncle Red to fight this supernatural force. Based on the novella Cycle of the Werewolf written by Stephen King, Silver Bullet is for the horror fan that enjoys a solid cast of characters, supernatural atmosphere, and a great story. Also joining me tonight is my fabulous co-host, Zena Dixon. And thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining me tonight. How you doing, Zena?
I'm doing well, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Tonight we're going to be talking about Silver Bullet, which obviously I'm excited about, we talked about, but I'm also excited because the very first episode you and I did on this show was about a werewolf movie, Cursed. So it's fun to finally get to be discussing another werewolf movie, especially one that I think you and I both enjoy. I mean, it's Stephen King, classic Stephen King 2, a little bit of supernatural, very good character development, at least in my opinion. I think that, I've been watching this one since I was a kid. I think that there's I do wish, spoilers. I do wish that the climax was maybe a little bit more. I think they do a good job. I think it's effective. But again, I just wish there was a little bit more oomph to the end.
I agree.
However, I think most people, when they watch a werewolf movie, so far it seems a lot of fixation becomes on the effects and trying to get that transformation. I think this movie did a really good job with the effects. I think it's not so much a prevalent part of this movie as maybe some other movies, werewolf movies,
Mhm.
but I feel like they were pretty effortless. Obviously, this is a 1985 movie. It's of its time. However, I think overall the effects were good. But yeah, I've been watching this since I was a kid. I really find the performances to be one of the reasons why I still love it. Megan Follows, I'm a big fan of. She was in the Canadian 1985 production of Anne of Green Gables. When I was a kid, I used to love this show, Avonlea, that was on the Disney Channel, made in Canada. And she was like in the movies that led up to that. And she is terrific in that, terrific in this. I love Everett McGill, who plays, the Reverend, and
Yes.
he is also in The People Under the Stairs, as
Yay.
well as Twin Peaks. And what I love about it, my roommate, I've never put this sort of connection together, but I got my roommate John into Twin Peaks, kicking and screaming. He did not want to watch the show. He did not really get into it. And then by the end, by the third season, through the third season, he finally became a fan. He got frustrated a lot because it can be frustrating.
Hmm.
But anyway, one of my favorite things about this, he caught, so I was super proud of him. So in the movie, the Reverend, he ends up getting, bunged in the eye with an eye patch, and he has to wear an eye patch. Well, so the actor Everett McGill starred in The People Under the Stairs with Wendy Roby, I think her name is, or something like that. Well, in Twin Peaks, their characters are married also on Twin Peaks, like they are in The People Under the Stairs. But in Twin Peaks, she wears an eye patch for the entire series. So I just thought it was this delightful little thing that in Silver Bullet, he has the eye patch. They're both kooky and People Under the Stairs. Then by Twin Peaks, he's like a good guy, and she's left now with the patch that he had from Silver Bullet. But anyway, those are some of my initial thoughts. I just think it's a solid movie. It's not the scariest movie. I think it's a great introductory movie for people coming into the horror genre. I think kids can watch it. I like that there's not like, especially because I think werewolf movies in general are devised for like the sort of, if you want to be academic about it, the teenager who's going through puberty. It's supposed
Mhm.
to sort of represent that. But I feel like this movie doesn't have any sort of over sexualization.
Right.
Megan Follow's character, she looks like a typical teenager dressed in normal clothes, nothing revealing. It doesn't take away from the performance, it adds to the performance.
Right.
I think that there's a lot to be said to suggest this movie. And just last thing, Stephen King in general, we'll get more into it, but I think he is really well known for, when you're reading his novels, these characters that are just, they become a part of your lives almost. Like I remember when I read The Stand, it's like 3,000 pages. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, how am I ever going to finish this? But like that one and it, by the time I got to the end, I felt like I knew these characters, and I'm like, I do not want this to end. And I feel like Silver Bullet is just another example of the characters and the family dynamics and the small town life, and just how that there's like this balance of good and evil, but it's not like so in your face. But anyway,
Right.
Zena, how did you first come into Silver Bullet? What are your thoughts about it, and so forth?
Well, I feel like it's very similar to your experience. Mine is I think I watched it as a kid, but I don't really remember it. I remember watching like probably bits and pieces as a kid. I remember rewatching it like years later. It was probably like 5, 6 years ago, because it used to be on Hulu. And I was just like, oh, I think I've seen this before. You know, sometimes you just get stuff like mixed up or it's been a while. And honestly, it is just such an awesome movie. And I feel like I always say this to you, but it's so underrated. Like, it's insane. I feel like it is one of my favorite Stephen King horror adaptations, just being honest with you. I think
Right.
it's a lot of fun. I love the fact that they kind of mix it up. So it's not super scary, but it does still have that horror element, that real chilling small town, like something's going on, you don't really quite know what's going on. It's like kind of like a who done it, and then when they reveal who it is, it's just like, oh my god. Like, I remember watching that and I screamed because it's right there. But I also like the fact that it's actually, it I feel like it offers something a little bit different because it's through the perspective of a teenager. And like you said, it's not about, she doesn't care about boys. I think there was like one time we saw her talking to a boy. This was just before Marty and his friends scared her. And it was just really brief, but it wasn't anything that was overly sexualized or anything like that. It's just
Correct.
a very straight to the point horror movie. I feel like anybody, like, if you don't like horror movies, you can watch this movie. If you love horror movies, you can watch this movie. If you have a kid who's like 12, 13, I feel like they can watch this movie and they'll be fine. And then even as far as it goes with the effects, obviously this movie was made in 1985, so it's not perfect, but I really don't think that it's that bad, you know? So I kind of, just like what you said, it's just that ending. I kind of wanted a little bit more from them as far as it goes with the ending. Like, it just seemed like, oh, that was it. It's just like, wait, I was hoping that they would, like, I don't know, separate the
Yes.
uncle from the kids type of thing. And he's still having a hard time believing, but it was just like, no, he was right there through the door. And next thing Gary Busey is just getting slammed against the shelf or something. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think that it's cool. I like the characters. They have a way of having you care about the characters, like you really do care about his, Marty and his sister's relationship. You care about the people in the town because it's just like every single week there's a funeral. It was getting out of control, and we'll talk about it, but I do have a scene that I still think that just stands out completely, and I would love to see something similar, like similar happening, because that's just truly terrorizing.
We'll
So,
jump into it. I'm curious what scene. What
oh,
scene
okay.
is it?
So it was basically where there was a whole bunch of town members where they were basically trying to figure out who is this creature, or what is this creature. So they all go into the woods, and they're
Mm,
kind of like in this swampy type of area. And then next thing we knew what happened to them. We heard a scream, and then a cut. There's just nothing but caskets lined up. If I was living in a place like that and that's how it was, I would move. Like, there's no
right.
reason. Like, at this point, I gotta go. Like,
Sure, for sure.
right?
No, excellent scene. It's so good. I mean, I think that there's a lot of, what's interesting about it is that there's a lot of really great, suspenseful atmosphere, good scenes, They're not, yes, not super scary, but
Right.
effective. And I think like that's an important thing that I think sometimes divides horror fans or creates all these subdivisions. I think horror, when I watch a horror movie anymore, it's like when I go back to watch the same, let's use, my favorite movie is Cujo, another Stephen
Mhm.
King movie. I have watched it way so many times, I couldn't even tell you how many. And obviously it doesn't scare me anymore. Like that, I don't like the first time I watched it, terrified. I mean, I watched it when I was a kid, but even as a teenager, I remember, there's a couple good jump scares in there. It takes a while to get to the scary stuff, but once it gets going, I think it really goes.
Right.
But I now watch it and I feel like horror in general, I don't need to necessarily be scared for me to love a horror movie. There's a lot of different factors. And I think some people are like, man, if it's not gory and roller coaster terrifying, it's not horror, or I don't love it. And I disagree. I feel like I enjoy horror sometimes. Like with Cujo, it's Dee Wallace's performance for me that I can watch over and over
Yeah.
again. Or Silver Bullet. I do enjoy the family dynamics, the characters,
Yeah.
scenes like that, the fog. It gives you the sort of, I mean, Stephen King was also known for taking gothic horror and contemporizing it with like works like Silver Bullet or Salem's Lot,
Yeah.
where you're sort of taking the gothic vampire and making it into a small town setting. Or with this, werewolves. It's sort of, I guess Silver Bullet does share a lot with Salem's Lot. But a scene like that, it's effective, and that's why I watch it. It's not because I was like, oh, what's happening? I mean, maybe the first time, or maybe the
Right.
first couple times I may have been scared. I don't remember it now, my initial viewings, but I think that that's what makes this movie work so well, is that you can watch it and find a lot to enjoy in it, even if it's not scaring you from beginning to middle to end. But I think that there's a lot of scenes in the movie that are effective like that. I also really love the when Megan follows character, when she walks past the Reverend or Everett McGill's character, and you see that he's the one with the eye patch. But when she's in the garage, and like it's the setup, like, oh, it's coming for we now know he's guilty, and she is now in this garage, sort of trapped, and it's the shadows, and it's the tension of it. I find that effective. I find that effective. But also, one thing I really like, and I'll have you jump back because I really, if you had more to say about that scene, but I do really love the main character of this movie, I would argue, is Marty. But I really love that the story is actually being narrated by Janey,
Yeah.
because I think the main dynamic is Marty and Uncle Red. And I think Janey is sort of the third wheel of that group. She's sort of pushed away.
Mhm.
Like there's a scene where they leave the church and Uncle Red's like, see you at the house, Janey, and he kind of takes Marty away, but he doesn't like really engage with her.
Yeah.
But that's what makes her the narrator of the story. I think that's kind of clever that it's
I think
from
so
her
too.
point of view, even though Marty is, the
Right.
sort of lead.
I agree with you, and it's so weird too. So even going back to what I was just saying, well, what I was saying previously, where it was just like, well, every week people were dying, but obviously it's a werewolf movie, so every month, so people were
For
dying.
sure. Yeah.
So what I thought was pretty cool about that is, like you said, with the, clearly the sister, it's from her perspective, right? But I love the fact that with Marty, you kind of see why he got fed up. And this is going to sound messed up because obviously first his best friend is murdered, then the girl that he has a crush on, doesn't she leave town?
Yeah.
Then on top of that, with the fireworks, the last straw was
Right.
the
Yeah,
fireworks,
for sure. But for
yeah,
sure.
because I mean, which I get it, but it was just like, come on, it's just one thing after the other. So even though it's like it's a werewolf movie, it's a horror movie, it's also like a mystery.
Yeah.
And like you said, you are absolutely right. The family dynamic, the way it's set up, like you just fall in love with the family. You don't want anything bad to happen to them. And sometimes with some movies, they'll try. It's like they try to force that. They try to force you to have that
Yeah.
connection, and you really just don't. So I don't know. I just think that it's really just I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but especially for its time, like even when it comes with the cinematography, like you were mentioning with the fog,
Yeah.
it's just like creepy. Like clearly this is a summer themed horror, which obviously
Yes.
this is one of the reasons why we did pick it, but it's
Yes, for sure.
also perfect for Halloween. So if you're interested in checking out that kind of stuff, and I have to be honest with you, maybe, I don't know, I watched this again when I remember that I did. I watched it as an adult, but I didn't see that it was going to be their pastor, or so it's like when that happened, and like I said, you just saw him with his eye patch, I screamed, because it's just like, but then it just started to make sense,
Yeah.
So a question for you, do you remember, like, when you first saw it, and did you know who it was, like, when you first watched the movie?
No, I don't think I did. I think you're right that it's sort of this mystery, and I feel like one thing I really like about it is another scene that's really great and effective. It can kind of, when you go back knowing who it is, you can see what they were doing. But I feel like it's one of those scenes that it leaves you with a lot of possibilities until it's resolved, which is the scene where I think it's right after the fog and all that. You're they're in the church, and it's the dream of the reverend, and everybody in the town, they're sort of saying their sort of things they've been saying, like private justice, this is what you wanted, and then they all sort of become werewolves. I love that scene. I love the sort of, it's almost over the top, but somehow it never quite crosses that line. But even where, like, the reverend has this sort of jump scare, and I think that scene right there is a huge clue of, like, you're kind of like, well, is he the werewolf, or does he maybe know what's going on? If he's dreaming about werewolves, maybe
Right.
he's going to have the answers. And ultimately, I love that they kind of just quickly gloss over it and are like, oh, does it only happen on the full moon? How did he become a werewolf? And they're like, well, maybe he doesn't even know. And that's kind of it. And that's enough. I don't feel like I needed any more
Right.
explanation than that. I feel like got it. But
And
what
I
about
agree with
you?
you.
Did you?
I agree with you on that, but no, again, like, I had no idea who it was, but I agree with you, and you're so right about that scene, because I did rewatch it the other day, and when I saw that, it was just kind of, obviously I know, but it was just like, whoa, the sign is right there, But then here I'm thinking that he was going to have more of a major role in the movie, so that he was going to prophesy something, because that happened previously in, some of Stephen King's work, where, like, the
Absolutely.
pastor or preacher, like, they're more involved. So I didn't really think anything of it. But whoa, see, I don't know. It's just one of those movies where I feel like every single time I watch it, I see something new, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, again, like, if you haven't seen this movie, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm just saying, if you haven't seen this movie, I feel like it's just like a fun little mystery,
It really is.
Yeah, and again, I feel like it's underrated, especially because it's like, when it comes to Stephen King's work, some of his work, obviously, people will talk about certain movies a little bit more, certain books a little bit more, but for some reason, it's like people forget about this one, or it falls between cracks and stuff, which I get, but in a way, it's so weird because we don't really have a lot of werewolf movies. So even when I think about this one, I feel like it is a top one.
I agree. I think it's well crafted, designed. I think you, like, just to emphasize a point you brought up, which is, yeah, we wanted to do this because it is sort of a summer movie that I think can be watched also at Halloween. I mean, technically, the time frame of the movie takes place late spring through summer into fall. But when I
Yes,
think of this movie, I think of summer, maybe because of the
same,
fireworks getting canceled, which I think a lot of people can relate to now with everything going on.
for
And I
sure.
think that it's one of those movies you can watch when it's just a little hot outside. Maybe the air's not working or it's off, and you're like, I just need something to just watch that you don't have to invest a lot of brain power into, but yet it's smart. You're
Right.
not going to be terrified and not sleep that night, but you are going to be engaged in the mystery. And yeah, the family dynamics and performances are great. I think, like, one of my favorite things about it are sort of the things that aren't thrown in your face. It's not like heavy, it's not like pushed upon you, but there are these sort of comparisons, like the brother sister relationship between the mom and Red, the brother
Mhm.
sister relationship between Marty and Janey, and the sort of what they can grow up to be, and how ultimately it does end on sort of this syrupy sweet note. But I kind of like that. I kind of like that it's like, I can say I love you now. Like, I like that it's this thing because
Yeah.
it's like again, like Cujo, the film that ends on a cliffhanger. They changed the book epilogue and instead just kind of give you this little freeze frame moment where you're supposed to imply that all this has happened. I feel like that then implies with Silver Bullet that they're not going to become Mom and Red, Mom and Uncle Red. But I do think Gary Busey's performance is terrific. There was this novel, there was a book written by, I think his name is like Tony Magistral or something like that. But there was a section about Silver Bullet in it, and he really focused on the character of Red and how Red is one of these characters that is thematically repeated in a lot of Stephen King's works, which is sort of the man child or he's not quite an adult as in like living up to his responsibilities. He's sort of a kid himself, but yet he is more adult than the kids. He's in this sort of in between. So where Janey can kind of, when Marty's like, "Hey, Uncle Red, this is going on," he's like, "Okay, you're nuts, kid. I love you, whatever." Janey can, right away, for no reason other than I think her youth, she can still believe in the mysteries of life. She's kind of like, you know what? I believe you. And together they're able to convince Red. Any other adult, the mom was never going to believe them if they
Yeah,
went to her. She
true.
was never going to believe them. But Uncle Red is that character who he doesn't want to believe that Marty's going to have this bleak life. He wants to believe there's another way. And because of that, he's creative and able to create Silver Bullet, you know? And, but again, just that character, I like that Janey doesn't become Janey and Marty are going to be okay. But I do love that she has that sort of resentment to Marty and this sort of like, I know I'm fully healthy and capable and I have the ability to use my legs, but I have emotions too. She's not just like a false two-dimensional character. A sibling in that position is probably going to feel resentment right back, just like Marty, but instead they work to do it. But anyway, what do you think about like Gary Busey's performance, the family dynamics, all of that?
I was going to talk about Gary Busey's character. I really love his character. I just feel
Yeah.
like he's a little bit misunderstood. And you are so right. When it comes to Marty, he wanted him to have like a different kind of life. That he's not his disabilities. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think obviously that's why he gave Marty more attention than Janey, which I get it. We've seen that happen before in families. It happens.
Absolutely.
So, but it was just like and even going back with the ending, what you said, how it was like that sweet type of ending. I love that ending. I
Yeah.
think that it's a nice closure because you know what? Throughout the film, that was a major. It wasn't even like a major problem, but if you have a sibling, if you have a brother, if you have a sister, sometimes it happens. But at the
Yes.
end of the day, your family and you realize the importance. Maybe this is what almost being murdered by a werewolf takes for you to be able to say, hey, I can say I love you
For
now,
sure.
type of
For
thing.
sure.
So I think it still works. And it's just, again, just the only thing is, it's just with that ending, it just felt like it was just like, monster, kill him, up, we did
Yeah.
the end. And it was just like, wait,
It was so
we want
abrupt.
more, but that's a good thing. Obviously if it leaves you wanting more, because sometimes if you watch movies, it's just like you can't wait for it to be over. So, but again, like I just feel like it's different from other like 80s horror movies that I remember seeing that came out like around the same time. I love the fact that it talks about, like, it kind of showcases like family. It's pretty much that. It's again, it's a mystery. It's about family. It's about werewolf. Well, a
Right.
werewolf. I was
Yeah.
hoping that he would have like a whole werewolf family. That'd be crazy.
Right. He might. We don't know. And that's what's cool about it though. Like we don't know. He might. We
Yeah.
don't know much about him. And that was one of the things. And I just like to say also with some of the supporting characters, you have Terry O'Quinn, who became, he
Mm-hmm.
a few years later was gonna become the stepfather. Uh
Yeah.
I do want to definitely get into Everett McGill's performance that I think is very layered and complex and the sort of well, first I'll say Terry O'Quinn, he represents sort of the problems of the town. He is a really good police officer whose hands are tied with this mystery. But I like that even with Uncle Red's character, when Red goes to him and is like, hey, this is what I hear is going on, Terry O'Quinn's character is sort of like, well, do you believe this? And Red's like, well, I believe it enough that you need to check out the Reverend. And instead of like making fun of him or picking on him, which is what any of the sort of
Yeah.
bar crowd would have done, this Terry O'Quinn, who's been the whole movie called this terrible police officer, actually does the smart thing.
Yeah,
Unfortunately for him, it doesn't work out because how can you ever be prepared for something like a werewolf? But he does investigate it. He is going on the right track, on the right path. And again, it doesn't work out for him,
yeah,
but he's showing that no, he was a good police officer. He was a good guy. And I just think overall the town, the way that like those dynamics are true. Those, when you're a kid almost, or when you're 20s, maybe it's like you kind of think like, these are caricatures. These people don't exist. I have learned these people do exist. The
true.
people in the bar that are like, there's the sort of bully jerk guy who kind
Mhm.
of bullies everybody else around. You have Brady's father who's in mourning and acts irrationally because of this, and it shows what grief can do. Although
Yeah,
that guy, I don't know who that actor is, but he did kind of, I don't know, something about him kind of creeped me out, and like, I don't know, I felt a weird vibe from him. Just, I don't
definitely.
know. Yeah, but again, he's a grief-stricken father, so he, it's based in reality. But then I think it all culminates in sort of the problem of the town, which are all these deaths. And Everett McGill's performance is layered and solid. I love his voice, the timbres in his voice,
Yeah,
but also the sort of like he's rationalizing why he has to kill this small kid. He's rationalizing why he's killing this woman who was going to commit suicide, and he's now saved her from hell.
yeah.
And I think that's all this. It would have been a different character if it wasn't played by Everett McGill, who is now currently retired from acting. He did pop up to be in the third season of Twin Peaks, and he was fantastic in it. And he's an actor that, again, I really only know him from Twin Peaks, People Under the Stairs, and Silver Bullet, but I love him
Yeah.
in each one of those roles. But what do you think about, sort of the townspeople, Terry O'Quinn and Everett McGill?
When it comes to the townspeople, I like that we have some stereotypes, because
Yeah.
it's a small town. So I love seeing that. I also love that scene when Janey's going around collecting cans and
Oh, I
bottles.
love that scene. Sorry, I love that
Yeah,
sequence.
it's such a
Yes,
great when
so creepy.
she takes the
Yes, she does
bottle.
randomly go up to that guy. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want, yes, love it, love it. That's one of my favorite sequences of the movie. Go
It's
on.
great, and because she went for it, like
Yeah,
and at first, obviously, she was so mad at Marty,
yes.
you
And
know.
she even sort of ends the sequence mad at Marty still. Then she
Yeah,
gets terrified. But yes,
right. It's
100%.
just a great scene. But yeah, so I like that it is kind of like some stereotypical like characters because it works, because we're showcased on a family that's not so typical. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of
Yeah.
in some ways family dynamic. Without them giving us way too much details where we just get exhausted. So when it comes with the actor Everett McGill, like you, I've only seen him in a couple of things, but he's always been so phenomenal. He just has such a
Yes.
stage presence. But especially he was just a psychopath in The People Under the Stairs.
Right,
But
right.
in this one, it's kind of like he's dangerous, but you can't help but you want to know more about him. I didn't want to know more about him in The People Under the
For
Stairs,
sure,
but
for
yeah, like
sure.
in this one, you want to know more about him. How did he get like this? Why is he now like a pastor? You know what I mean? There's just like there's so many questions, with that. And to me, he's always giving me like this is sound messed up, but he would give me like David Hasselhoff. Is it Hasselhoff? Okay,
Yeah.
somebody's probably gonna butcher me. And Christopher Reeves type of
Yes.
vibes, right?
I see that David Hasselhoff. I've never thought of it, but yes, and I did think Christopher Reeve.
Right?
Yes. So you're right. That's sort of,
Yeah,
yes,
so
I
it's
agree
just like
completely.
just seeing him in such this role where he's just like you said, he's trying to justify killing. Like he already clearly killed a kid, who knows how many. So it's nothing to him. He feels like he's doing the Lord's work. That's horrible.
It's true. It's horrifyingly horrible.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but no, he's awesome. He's awesome. And then you're right about Terry O'Quinn. Like I always just love seeing him on screen, to be honest
For
with you. But I
sure.
love the fact that he didn't make fun of him, and I was kind of expecting that, but he didn't make fun of him. He just went to go check it out.
Yeah. And I think we should probably also talk about Corey Haim. I mean, he is sort of the star of the movie. Obviously, this is before all these his problems began, but he really does shine in this movie.
He
I
does.
love the sort of he never feels sorry for himself. He is always trying to like, he just wants to have fun with his friends. That's all he wants. And so, yes, he has natural disappointments and has frustrations, but he genuinely feels one of my favorite moments is when the prank has been played on Janey. He goes to her room that night to give her the money for her ruined nylon stockings. But I love the sibling relationship. She doesn't take all the money. She's like, I could get it for cheaper and gives him part of it back. So it
Oh,
just shows that sort of great little sibling truth of relationship. But his performance, when I believe even though he's playing this kid with a disability, he shows how powerful he is. He fights back, he has this firework, whatever rocket, and he uses it to help him out. He's resourceful. He's very resourceful, which I think he gets from his Uncle Red.
hmm,
And it just shows how great it is to have an influence in a kid's life that maybe isn't the stereotypical adult who has it all together, but can still provide insight to a kid on how to survive in this world,
right.
any kid. And I think Marty's performance, like when you can see the joy when he's on Silver Bullet, like riding it and just
Yeah.
going, but the terror when he's stuck in this little bridge and screaming for help, I just think all the performance in this movie it make it work, but obviously the whole movie is held together by Corey Haim,
Hmm.
and he does a sensational job in it.
He does. He does. And he's like one of my favorite actors, and I love seeing him on screen. And like you
Yeah.
said, this was clearly before all his problems began. And like you said, his character alone, you could just tell, like he wasn't ashamed or embarrassed or
Not at all.
or anything like that. He just wanted to have fun. He really cared about those
Yeah.
fireworks.
Yeah.
So he was just like a sweet kid. He's just a regular kid, and I don't know, it's just a kind of a feel good type of movie, like all around. So
And then I just liked us to focus a little bit on the ending and just talk about what we were discussing already throughout this episode, which for such a good movie, it doesn't ruin the movie. The ending is solid. It works. Everything comes together. I just wish that there was a little more oomph to it. I believe you had said earlier, like even if the characters had gotten separated, like some sort of a little bit more drama instead of it all kind of taking place in the living room.
right, right.
Like they move from one side of the room to the other, and that's
Mhm.
sort of it. Especially because the effects appear to have been working. They were solid. You have the sort of drama and build up moments, and I'm happy with how it ends on the final lines and how they're all laying on the floor together, the little joke that Corey makes. But I just wish there was a little bit more to it, a sort of chase
Right.
sequence, or
Yeah.
somebody jumped out the window and distracted him, or something. But
Hmm.
yeah, what do you think about that ending
Yeah.
and
So like,
climax, I should say?
yeah, rewatching it, it's like I still feel this. Like I felt that way when I watched it a couple of years ago, and then I felt that way even a couple of days ago when I watched it. And it's just because it doesn't make any sense. It's like we had such a nice flow of the
Yeah,
movie, a really nice pacing. So I don't know what happened, but you kind of bring up a good point. Maybe it had something to do with the costume design,
yeah,
of the werewolf, or something like that. But even with that, they didn't even have to present him right away. There could have been like signs, like maybe broken window, type of thing. Like, and I'm thinking at the same time too, it's like, okay, when they first got back to the house, they could have been in the living room, but I'm pretty sure, let Janey be a teenager and she wants to go upstairs to her room, type
yeah.
of thing. You know what I mean? Just so we can have some space out stuff, and then that's when she gets a broken window or something creepy happens.
Correct.
So, but obviously, with Marty and his uncle, they would have been together. You know what I mean? That would make sense. But for them all just to be together like that, I wasn't too sure about it. But then a part of me, I kind of like the fact that it all happened in the living room. But I still feel like there was something ending. Well,
Yeah,
not ending. There was something missing. Meaning, like, okay, after they killed him, I would really have liked them, not in a whole like super duper long type of dialogue. How are you guys going to explain this?
right,
Right? What are you
right.
going to
Good
say?
call.
I mean, obviously, you can't say he was a werewolf, but you can say, like, he just went mad and he attacked us before saying that he killed all these people.
Yeah,
That can work, but
that's a good
maybe that's
point.
just, yeah, but maybe that's just a whole stretch. So it's just like, I get it. But then because I enjoyed the movie so much and I really enjoyed like the pacing, it was just kind of a little bit disappointing that it felt abrupt, the ending.
Abrupt is the right word. I feel like you said, the rest of the movie is so crafted well, and this fits into it. But I just feel like one more little string of event could have
Right.
happened, or a little bit more setup, a little bit more tension. Again,
Mhm.
nothing wrong with it, but I think that's the problem, is that there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing great about it. It's just sort of the
Yeah.
ending, and it all works and is fine. But again, that's my only thing. Well, do you have any final thoughts then on Silver Bullet?
Watch it. If you haven't watched it, if you have watched it, watch it again.
Agree completely. I think it's a fun movie to watch on a summer night, or even, yeah, in late fall, Halloween time. I think if you enjoy werewolf movies, this is up there with some of the best werewolf movies. I think it's a Stephen King movie. It has all these sort of things that are working for it, and then it does deliver. With the exception of that climax, it's still worth hands down watching it. Again, my favorite part of the movie is watching Megan Follows. I've been a fan of her since I was a kid, watching Anne of Green Gables. I think Gary Busey's delightful. Corey Haim, Everett, McGill. It all comes together for a nice, suspenseful werewolf movie. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What's your favorite Stephen King movie or book? And what is your favorite werewolf movie? Please comment below. And thank you, Zena, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, under her Real Queen of Horror moniker on YouTube, or over at Wicked Horror. And I'm Justin. You can also find me at Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Zena, I had a blast talking about Silver Bullet with you tonight. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you all soon.